Well, thanks so much for coming, and what I wanted to do, instead of having the conversation about work, and by the way, you know, I'm sharing the space with two old friends, and that kind of prompted this idea of having a discussion about the past art here in Oklahoma City, and the influences, and the present, and hopefully the future. And there's several artists here. And what this is really about is a dialogue. Notice there's no table. It's very open. We can have a conversation because I want the interaction. And to me, the arts, and I say arts in plural because it's not only the visual arts. Paul used to be a rock and roll star at one time. That we're all influenced by all the arts and all. And
Still is.
You could go all day without bringing that up.
But anyway, my intention is to have a dialogue and to have you guys have a sense of that the richness of our participation, especially the older people here, how, well, I'm older in the sense that we started when there wasn't as many opportunities like JRB's. This is very pleasant to have a gallery like this, but we weren't always in this kind of feast of galleries, Laura's gallery, all the other participants, your current gallery. Hey, plug that. But see, that's what this is all about, because all that went on, all the interaction, has to do with where we are today and how you're forging on the future. That's why we got the youth here to my right, so, and the youth out there. Well, you are younger than me. But, and just for you people that don't know much about me, I'll do a quick synopsis and let other people talk. But basically, you know, I went to college and got the undergrad and a couple grad degrees, but what was important for me, and I also worked in 2 galleries, so I was somewhat of a gallerist myself. Arts Place 1, the original Arts Place. I was assistant director and coordinated all kinds of things from music to visual arts, to poetry readings, to plays, and so on. And then I worked at the Arts Annex, which was now City Arts, was part of the museum. And I did some of the similar things. We had original plays and stuff. But it all started, and Ray is my colleague here, and John, you know, my first one-man show was at the CAF, which was a very unique gallery. It was one of a kind. It was the oasis in what was a pretty bleak gallery scene or art scene, but it included original plays, music, visual arts, studios. I had a studio up there. Ray was the residence there and studio mate with all of us that had a studio. So that interaction, and I had a good friend that wrote a play about Vincent van Gogh that was, I first saw that there at the CAF, and then I ended up being very good friends with him. And so, and then I eventually evolved down on the street early in the early 80s and shared a studio, and a lot of people came through here. And again, the connectedness of the interaction of all the artists. So there was a new article about Edgar Heberberg in Art in America. Well, he was down there before he got hired at OU in our studio getting typeset, you know, for his work that was going out across the country and the world. So what I'm saying is that we are kind of the fabric, or we're all the artists, both visual and otherwise, are very interconnected, and we, you know, in the early days kind of took it upon ourselves to do a lot of the heavy lifting as far as getting things going. So I still, and part of the end part of what I want to convey in my original statement here is that even though my first show was in 1974, obviously I'm still showing, I'm still growing, I'm still learning from everybody as far as old and new. You know, and the great thing about this era, you can get on the internet and see a discussion in New York, you know, about what's happening there. So it's just prehistoric times when I first started showing and now. So it's pretty interesting. So what I'd like to do is maybe start over here. I first met John when I had my first show at the CAF, and he interviewed me. And so we'll start there and work this way. And you can introduce yourself however you want to.
I just wanted to say that, I want to say first what a privilege it's been to review all the work. I've gotten to see so many artists, and now over generations, and then people like George and people I've known like Ray for so long, I've gotten to see how their work evolves, you know, and then new artists. And then one of the things that I find just thrilling is because, you know, I commuted to the old Oklahoma building near 4th and Broadway, through all the quote urban renewal, and I thought they successfully destroyed Oklahoma City, and I'm really, really thrilled the way the neighborhoods and the way, because everybody knew with the Paseo, you know, that it's such an interesting thing to have that angling street and the feeling that it has, but with the automobile alley and the 16th Street Plaza District and the old movie district, you know, and all these different areas, and coming back and like, you know, we had like the first Friday, and it was surprising when it built up, and now like there's a second Friday, and Norman has a second Friday, and so there's a lot going on, and it's really fun to be here for this, and so anyway, it's interesting too. You get where you wonder where you're going with your work and where other people are going, and it's just nice to be around and see that happen, you know. And I'll pass on to Ray. J.R. Witt was a big influence on Ray and I both, and we both had studios down there, and I got started really reviewing, and I just, I could say on my full career, I just backed into everything I've accidentally done, and they weren't getting reviewed. The Warehouse Theater was a great theater, and I also want to say how much I appreciate the theater groups and how determined and to give great theater to Oklahoma, like Carter Square and the Shakespeare in the Park, and I could almost quote Churchill on giving the most for the least, that people struggle along with. We've had some wonderful theater groups and wonderful actors, and also I think in general in the country that where things were so much just New York or Los Angeles, I think it is spreading out, and different cities are really coming on, and I think Oklahoma City can be part of that. So I'm really thrilled to be around to do it. Ray,
well, Oklahoma City's always been part of that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And I want to say, if I can say one more thing, if anybody is younger and not familiar with early Oklahoma City in the 20s, there's this postcard history of 3 volumes of Vanished Splendor. And they're very hard to get, but they're amazing. There were incredible things in the 20s, and incredible people came here before 1920 and in the 20s. So anyway, there's a lot to look into.
I made Ray speechless because there were a couple of publications. I wasn't here then, but there were the Paseo papers, and there was this, I
Tiny
think,
Town Crier.
that's right, and J.R. Witt. And it would be great to hear that history.
Well, the CAF started in '67, I think, is when JR, wasn't it '66?
I think there was another group for a couple of
Yeah.
years. That's not when I went there. Yeah.
It was down on 608 Robert S. Kerr. It's like now.
609.
609, sorry. Yeah, across the street was a parking garage.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, and I had a studio there in the summer of 68.
Was she born then?
And that's when I first met
I
Bob.
think so,
And
yeah.
you and Paul Richey, who had the studio down the hall, used to torment me. Because I was a kid, I was dumb. I was a little dumb kid. And they just delighted in shocking me. Especially Paul. Just, oh, yeah.
So one of the things people used to worry that I had a studio and I had a cot and stayed at.
You were weird.
Was in Norman. I was so close to Dayton, I stayed downtown. And they were worried something would happen to me. I'd say, no mugger could afford to stay downtown. There's nobody downtown. So your hours per victim of getting mugged, you would never pass. You couldn't sit there hours waiting for one person to walk by. So anyway.
Yeah, I lived down there too, and we did. Oh my God, the theater was amazing. Mike Mullen's work was just remarkable.
Influence on me, big time.
And I kept trying to leave town. And I'd go away for a year or 2 years or something, and something kept pulling me back. A lot of things pull you back, but one thing that I discovered, the first time I escaped and went to LA thinking, or San Francisco first and LA to thinking, oh, I'm gonna see some really good art. You know, now I've got a chance to see some really good art, and I go out there and it's like, God, we do this all the time. And it was true. We were doing some amazing stuff down there. Just the spontaneity of the work and the fact that we had no rules or limits, except we wanted to do, whatever we did, we wanted to do something that we had never seen before. And that was the whole deal, wasn't it?
It was a very experimental time at the CAF. I mean, anything went, and sometimes it did. I mean, there was some really weird stuff, but it was all cool because it wasn't commercial. It was a different time, you know, and it coincided with what was happening with Sam Shepard and New York and that kind of thing. Very experimental in the theater, and all those people, the Linkies, you know, the poets, you know, that was all very big influence on my work.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I hated theater until I heard
Until I
some-
saw you in that play.
Yeah. Right.
For those of us who don't know, what's the CAF?
Contemporary Art Foundation.
Okay.
It was a two-story warehouse that had studios. It
Is
had
it a couch?
no, it was a
No, where was
Robert
it?
S. Kirk.
No, it was Robert S. Kerr,
Robert S.
609 Robert S.
It
Kerr.
was a, you know, the theater. It had studios. It had 2 exhibit areas upstairs.
And I ran a
downstairs.
movie,
Right.
yeah,
Yes.
a movie thing. And that was at the time when it was movies,
Yeah.
and you had to change the
There's no-
Oh,
projectors. And,
Real to real.
and no one had ever seen these movies before, like Citizen Kane and all these, you know, French films that, and foreign films that no one had ever seen Bergman in Oklahoma City before, you know? And we ran them on Saturday, Sunday nights, Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights, and that was kind of my deal for several years.
Now, was this a nonprofit?
Nonprofit.
And it was started by?
It was JR and Fran basically ran it, and there were a few people who were donors and contributors. JR and Fran basically had been involved in the art scene, the Arts Council, the foundation out at the fairgrounds.
Fairgrounds, yeah,
The
fairgrounds.
fairgrounds. That was the art
Science
center.
and
The
arts.
art center.
Science and arts.
The art center.
The art center.
Just
Science
the
and
art
arts.
center. The art center.
Before they went together.
The art center, the one that Mrs. Kilpatrick and her friends used to picket if they showed a nude. And I think you got credit for your nudes
I
if you
actually
showed
did,
it.
yeah.
You were always getting into trouble. I remember, because I'm much younger than these guys, I came to CAF very, very late. In fact, I had only discovered it about a couple of months before it burned down.
April 1st, 1976.
Right.
Yes.
And LaFawn,
DJ LaFon show.
LaFawn show, DJ LaFawn show was up in it, burnt.
Everything burned.
Yeah, but let me give this kind of an interesting story about this lady and this lady right here. The first time I met Laura and Ray, I was, you know, young and didn't know anybody. I was from the south side of town, so I didn't have the connections of all of the north siders that were, you know. And but I was a young artist trying to fit in, and I was invited to a party, I think of yours, and it was like, you know, you read stories of what was going on at the factory in New York City and all of these kinds of really cool things that were going on. And my wife and I went to this party, and I think it was at your place. And we walked in, and I didn't really know anybody at all, but the whole front of the house was wrapped in newspaper. Oh my God, you don't remember that?
I don't remember much.
I mean, I'm talking about the art, the furniture, the walls. I remember I thought it was so cool that whoever did this was had wrapped the vacuum cleaner.
Genius.
And I walked in, and I remember you were there. Do you remember that? Oh, my God.
The
Anyway,
air was thick.
that too. But anyway, but I walked in and I went, well, all right. This is, I think I found some mates here.
We did conceptual, I mean, we did,
Yeah.
that's what
Well,
our thing was.
And I tell you, this lady right here, I credit a lot of what occurred back then, or that's how I viewed it. Being kind of an outsider coming in, the Bozo Ball.
Bozo Ball was
The Bozo
important.
Ball, which was a spin-off of the Beaux-Arts Ball at the Hall of Mirrors.
Based on the woman who owned this house, that woman right there, Nan Sheets' concept of, it was a debutante ball, we picked our own debutantes, and, yeah, it was pretty intense.
You gotta keep in mind that during that period of time, there was nothing.
There was nothing.
And parties were big because there was also Kathy Morris, who went on to go to Santa Fe and be pretty prominent in the 80s, big collectors, Hollywood collectors. She would throw the best parties on what is now Film Row,
Yeah.
before what became commercial as it is now. Some of the greatest parties, art parties, things that you would read about. So what we're trying to illustrate is that you're not in a bubble here, or you're not in a vacuum, that all this art happens because of our interaction and even getting in kind of verbal fistfights about being true to your art kind of stuff, which seems pretty funny, but we did do that.
This is kind of
I'm talking about genocide.
Honestly.
I'm going to do a segue here to what's happening now. I had to, in fact, I think it was maybe 8 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that. And I remember you were there. We were sitting out in front of the restaurant drinking, and with a bunch of other artists. And I mentioned something to the effect that, where in the hell are all the new young artists?
I remember that.
And in fact, I wrote a thing for the Cross Currents a long time ago that asked that question: where are these people? And it's interesting that the ones that I commented on in that are real prominent now, which was kind of.
Oh, you have such good taste.
No. I kept thinking, I kept going to these openings, and it was the same damn old artist, that was on the walls everywhere, and I've got, which,
And I still like to be home though.
I won't comment on that.
I'm talking about the wall.
No, but the point is, I mean, in any city or any community, you have to have you have to have new energy. You have to have new talent coming in. And I remember that, like a year after we had that conversation, I wrote that thing for Cross Currents and everything, that I went to a show, and at wherever, probably IAL or something like that, and I saw really, really incredible works of art on the wall, and I didn't know their names, and I went, yes, finally. And my question while we set up a sale for drinking whatever we were drinking at the time, where were they? Well, they were in their garages, they were in their back rooms, they were in their studios, and it just seemed like it just yet another renaissance, a burst that also coincided with the expansion of our city.
Exactly.
Everything, the new buildings downtown, and there was just this new, a new resurgence of not only the old farts, but a lot of really good young artists that came out at the same time, and it all kind of happened around the same time. Downtown was clicking, and everything was kind of moving and bubbling, and
What time was it in?
I don't know,
Probably started around the 2000s.
Right.
Slowly,
Yeah,
slowly
late
building.
90s.
Well, this is 1990. okay? This is 1990, and it was a lamentation about the art scene in Oklahoma City. And it was talking about how long it had been since the Contemporary Art Foundation, that's the building, on fire. And it said, let's see, it houses a spirit of encouragement for experimentation, exploration in the arts, has not been equaled in the arts, has not been equaled in tiny towns since. The CAF received international media recognition and attentions for its innovative programs that spawned many imitators in other tiny towns. The CAF ignited controversy in the art community, ignited imagination of its patrons, it ignited the creative talents of its artists, and finally, it ignited itself.
You wrote that, didn't you?
I knew that was coming.
Yeah.
So Trent, do you want to pick it up? You guys, let's move this way, away from the older people.
Yeah, so like, it's kind of what Paul was talking, whenever, so I graduated with this studio art degree in 2002, and I was noticing there was artists around my age, and then George's group.
And then
like,
the real art.
So like there was this seemed like there was this gap of like it might have been around the 90s, either the oil bust or some of this, that seems like we lost a generation of artists. And I know that's what fueled momentum starting whenever Julia got involved with OVAC, and that was starting to build up, because the first momentum was 01?
2002.
2002, yeah. Like, because I remember I just barely heard about it, and me and studio mate, like, were like just randomly just dropped our work off, so I was in the first momentum, and then on the committee the next year, and it's just, because that was the mission of that event, was to give younger artists, so the only rule was the artist had to be age 30 or younger, and anything else was fair game. And so going to the first event was like, I had never seen anything like it. There was a woman laying in a pool of milk with like a table of cookies next to her. There was a woman in a nude suit, like basically the nude drawing the figure, and then like clothed people from the audience. And then there was a 3-foot steel welded ball rolling around in a pit, crushing ceramic objects. And just this completely random, didn't know what you were to expect going around the corner.
And I'd like to point this about Laura here. I don't know if you know Laura. I credit her with OVAC.
Oh my God, yeah.
I truly believe that OVAC would not have survived
No.
if it hadn't been for your.
No,
I'm not
When did
being
when did OVAC start?
88.
Okay.
So around
And when did you open?
Yeah.
It actually came out of a bitch session of
Bitch
the
session.
Cafe Society.
Right.
And which actually got started in the 70s when there was, for a short period, there was a Grover Cleveland Arts Institute. It lasted for not very long, but Brunel
Couple of
and
years.
Cynthia Adler and I kind of started that little
Yeah, I wasn't around at that
That,
time, but I remember.
little cafe society, and we would meet at Chadwick's every
Oh,
Wednesday at
God.
5 o'clock, and you just knew you could go there and find other
I
artists
just
and
remember having
musicians and
big,
everything.
huge arguments with everyone.
Yes, it was great.
You arguing with me?
Oh my God, we were just having horrifying.
So then it kind of quit because there was no internet, so there had to be somebody that was kind of the glue, and I was the glue.
Yeah.
And once I gave the glue up, it kind of left. And then John was my studio mate, and one day he walked in and he said, I'd like for you to start up the Cafe Society again. So we started it up, and we met at the Class and
Class
Grill.
and Grill.
And there were about 40 people that came to the first one, and it was bitching. And so the next one, there was 20, and the next one, there were 6, and they were the 6 that did the most bitching.
And you have to understand there are also other satellite groups doing the same bitch in a different area. So, and I remember, Bill, we were in a couple things off of Western
And
and
the IAO.
the IAO and all kinds of things. So, and individually bitching to each other. And so.
Just a bunch of bitches.
Yeah. But the point is that there was a whole lot of people that were not even mentioning it. So I'm just disclaimer that we can't touch everybody, but continue.
What were you bitching about primarily?
Well, I mean, part of it was the lack of support,
Right.
which there's a lot more now, but also literally fights about the aesthetics. You know, like whose aesthetics are better than, you know, whatever.
No.
But actually,
I never thought about it.
I-
Are you kidding?
for OVAC though, John came to me and he said, I think that they have a real.
John who?
John
Because
McNeese.
John
Yes.
John McNeese came to me after this, during this session, and he said, I think they have a real itch. And I think that we could help them. And so what do you think if we start a nonprofit organization that can go out and get the money from the state and then give back to the individual artists? Because by the law, they could only give to organizations, not to individual artists. And that's what started OVAC,
Yeah,
was from that.
Does this mean we can think of OVAC as the daughter or son of bitching?
I see the
You know, it may be that dry spell was after the oil bust. Because when I moved here in '81 and I went to Festival of the Arts, the way people sold art. B.J. White would sell massive pieces like this and be sold out in 2 days. But after the bust, so many things dried up and the artists felt it.
Before the bust, I remember the only place that I sold work, there was an interior decorator, Norman Welks.
Oh, yeah.
Way,
63rd,
on 63rd Street, he had a lot of clientele, and once a month he would have these shows. And I remember having words with artists saying that, you know, Colin, you're just selling out. You're selling out here. You're going to this real commercial place and everything. And I'm going, yeah, okay.
I thought I'm trying to survive.
Well, you actually did stuff that you could sell. You actually did concrete pieces.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. But at the time, there really wasn't much going, I mean, there wasn't much going on.
This is the kind of stuff I was putting out. Yeah.
Well, if I can jump in, a
Please.
lot of this history I first became aware of when I was in college and I was interning at Oklahoma Arts Council. And part of my job as an intern was to keep the artist records up to date, and it's probably different now, but at the time it was a filing cabinet, and there was a file folder for all the artists that they were tracking in Oklahoma, and that was such an incredible learning experience for me. Like, you know, I would clip the new articles and go and file them in, and of course while I'm in there, like reading what else is in the file, and that was a great learning experience for me, but also kind of taught me a lot about, you know, what had happened in the arts community so far, but also just the potential for people to take on their own initiative and kind of make something happen on their own, because there were lots of artists who had come before who were, you know, like, yeah, there were these complaint sessions, but also there was the response of, okay, well, what are we going to do about it?
We didn't just bitch.
And there is, and I think still to this day, I think one of the greatest things about being in this community, in this place, is that there is room for us as individuals to see a problem or a gap and to say, okay, well, I'm going to do something about it, and to have the community to support you in that effort. And so that seeing that history really motivated me to become more involved and, you know, see what's my place, how do I fit into this?
Did you find, you know, this is what I would tell everyone who told me, what are you doing in Oklahoma City? You know, they would say,
Yeah.
oh my God, why are you in Oklahoma City? And I would say, well, I'll tell you why. Because if you want to see something done, you have to do it yourself.
Mhm. Yeah.
And this place, you can do it. You don't have to suck up to anybody. You don't have to be friends with anybody. You don't have to ask for anybody for money, you know. You just go out and do it, and you get a few friends, and you just do it. And it's the most exhilarating part of doing art anywhere. And you can do it here. And I'm sorry, New York. I'm sorry, San Francisco and Los Angeles, you know.
Well, they have.
You haven't got anything on
Well,
creativity.
and those cities that you're mentioning too, they've already established the rules.
Yeah. Well,
Their
we have
own
them now.
rules
We've got a lot.
or the
of rules
hierarchy
now.
that creates what is being created.
Yeah.
It's much more difficult in a situation, a city, I
Yeah.
would assume. as
Yeah,
opposed
to kind of make
I mean,
your presence.
what you and
and
Romy
say-
are doing right now,
Right.
if you tried to do that in New York City right now.
Right, there'd be no way.
There'd be no,
Well,
financially,
no,
there would be no
there's
way.
500 people doing the same
Right,
thing.
right.
You know,
Yeah.
they're all doing the same thing. So, you know, it's just dog eat woman. You know, that's.
But
we don't
you're-
need that, do we?
But I think part of not only the history, but you worked here for a while
Mhm.
and gone on and worked at OVAC. So would you like to talk about how you maneuvered? And you two should maybe talk about what you foresee in the future.
Yeah, so right out of college, my first job actually was working here in this gallery. I was here for about 1.5 years before I went to OVAC. And again, a tremendous learning experience because this gallery does represent so many Oklahoma artists. I got to meet a lot of people and not just like read about them in the file, but get to actually work with them and put on
And hear
exhibitions
the
with them.
pitch.
Yeah. But that was really, I think, the greatest part about the job was getting that one-on-one interaction with artists, which really made me excited to, I mean, still, that's my favorite part of this kind of work is working with artists. And I was just telling someone a couple of days ago how whenever I'm in a room with artists and we're collaborating on things together, it feels kind of like anything is possible. And a lot of the conversations that I have with artists don't, you know, it's not about what the limitations are or, well, that's impossible, like that idea is impossible. That word hardly ever comes up because there's always a way to do it, and I feel like artists aren't afraid of things that might seem impossible. So I worked here for 1.5 years, and then I went to OVAC, and that was, again, a huge learning experience, not just about the Oklahoma City community, but it's really statewide and beyond. But there really saw, you know, we really were while I was there for about 9 years, we were in a period of really evaluating kind of what the infrastructure of support already existed for artists in Oklahoma and what were the gaps and how could those gaps be filled and who are the ones to do it. And while OVAC can't fill every single gap, there were certainly a lot of connections that were made to try and make that happen. And then it motivated me to kind of strike out on my own and try and do some of that independently from the organization, which is what I've been doing for the last 2.5 years, working independently as a curator and artist and managing projects for other organizations. But early last year, my creative partner, Romy Owens, and I started a space, Current Studio, and it was really in response to those gaps that we saw that had not yet been filled. Because each organization or each individual can fill one gap perhaps, or maybe more, but there are lots of them. And so we thought, okay, what else could we do that would kind of push our community again a little bit further and support artists in a new way and make a space that could show art in a new way. So really focusing on supporting artists to kind of create something maybe a little more ambitious than they've ever done. Because again, like thinking about, you know, that artists can make the impossible possible, especially if you give them a little bit of support, you know? And all of these experiences that I've had, and in particular, I think the experience of Current Studio so far, we're about 1.5 years in, has led me to a place where like, I don't want to do anything by myself anymore. I want everything to be collaborative because the potential is so much bigger. And that's true with my partnership with Romy as collaborators curatorially, but also as artists, but also collaborating with all of the artists who come through our space. Like, I'm not interested in making work by myself anymore because the work that we do together is so much more meaningful and has so much more potential built into it because, you know, if we work together, we're going to make something that neither of us could have ever made on our own. And that's what I really see as being kind of thing that's going to push us forward is more collaboration, and not just among visual artists, but across disciplines as well. I think is really important. That I do think that there are some very well connected networks of artists, particularly within their own disciplines. But I'm starting to see those barriers within disciplines break down, and dancers and musicians and poets and visual artists can all work together. Yes,
That's right.
And I think maybe there was a period where people were more focused within their own disciplines, and that was good for a while to develop their.
Well, I think it's been both. It's been both.
I think it's coming back around.
Prehistoric days, that's, because I've done video and I've done this and that, and I love that. And what I did at Arts Annex was, did original plays and we did collaborative stuff. That's why I love your new place.
Thank you.
George, remember Kate from the Arts Center?
Yeah.
I can feel Nan. She's standing here looking at us. She wrote a column for the Daily Oklahoman that pulled the art out of everything. We had Max Sisson, who brought us from New York when mothers were professional. We had the wonderful JRB, who sacrificed and sacrificed. And Nan did the same thing. And I know she's looking at us now going, yeah.
Yes.
And I heard her say, save your capital, live upon your whatever, when she was trying to keep the Art Center going.
Right.
Don't waste your gold, whether it's financial. And for you, exactly what you said, we gotta pull together. I'll shut up then.
No, and I want you to, I didn't mean to interrupt your flow, because, continue.
Well, I mean, I guess I could give an example of the project that we're working on now at Current Studio, which I'm very excited about and has a lot of potential for impacting the future of our community. So one of the kind of signature programs that we've developed at Current Studio is our Artist in Residence program, and we invite an artist to come and take over the gallery for a period of at least a month, sometimes longer. The gallery essentially becomes their studio for that period of time. We give them a cash award, and we give them whatever other kind of support that we can offer, whether it's curatorial input, or they need help like sourcing certain kinds of materials, or they need help recruiting more hands of volunteers to help make something. If we can take care of that and they can focus on making the work, then we've seen now we're in our 4th artist in residence that the growth in their work is really accelerated during that time. And that's very exciting to me, to help an artist kind of achieve a new level in their practice. So our current artist in residence is actually a collective of artists called Factory Obscura. And this collective was just formed earlier this year with the specific intention of creating collaborative and fully immersive art experiences. So creating fully immersive environments that you can walk into and interact with, that's made by a collective of artists. And so there's a group of close to 20 artists that are at work as we speak at Current Studio. The gallery is closed for 3 months actually while we're building this installation. It opens on November 9th. But we've been meeting with that group of artists since about mid-May to kind of come up with the conceptual idea for the installation that we're building, but also to lay the groundwork for kind of the core values of what this group is trying to accomplish and what it's going to look like going forward. Because the installation at Current Studio is temporary, but this idea has a lot more possibility to it and a lot more potential for permanence and a permanent impact, with the ultimate goal being that Factory Obscura will have a location of its own that will be a permanent experience that people can come to, that will become a destination for people to come and have an experience like they won't have anywhere else in the world, is really the idea. But that also, it creates a new sort of economic model for how artists can be supported, that ultimately in this permanent location, artists will actually be employed to make the work, employed full-time with thriving wages and benefits and the support of an institution really to make the kind of work that they want to make. but also to have a real impact on the community with, education and just bringing people together to have really meaningful experiences. And across all disciplines, really, we really want it to be a multidisciplinary kind of collaboration. And right now it's only about 20 artists, but right now we're building an installation that's about 1,500 square feet. And ultimately, we hope it'll be many times that, and so the collective will grow as the projects grow in size and scale and complexity. But that's what we're working on now, and I really think that we're looking at other models of collectives that have done similar things across the country and are seeing a lot of success with that, both artistically but also financially. And I think that's a really exciting thing to sort of flip the traditional model of how artists are supported on its head a little bit, and rather than having an artist make a body of work that hopefully someday someone might want to pay them some money for it, that we can actually pay the artists while they're working, and on an ongoing, consistent basis. And how could that revolutionize what artists are capable of?
Are there other organizations in the country that are doing that?
Yeah, I mean, specifically we're looking at Meow Wolf in Santa Fe, their business model, but we're also looking at the City Museum in St. Louis and some other experiences but Meow Wolf specifically has really hit on something that is having a significant effect on their local economy, but also for artists in particular. Of course it has impact on tourism and that kind of thing, but the local arts community has been so re-energized, especially the younger artists who felt a little left out of what the typical Santa Fe art scene was like. And they're completely transforming it. I mean, last week, Vince Cadlebeck, who's the CEO of Meow Wolf, was just named CEO of the Year for the state of New Mexico. And he was almost a high school dropout. He barely graduated high school, and he's an artist, and he just is pursuing his passion, and it's turned into this big thing that's now benefiting all these other artists and their community. And now he's being recognized as a model business person, and so I just find that really exciting, and I don't see any reason why we can't create that here.
Well, and I think that's the goal too, that we're all in this together, that there's not segregated. I mean, there's a little bit of competitiveness in a certain way that we all have, but it's all about the cohesiveness of the interaction of whatever art discipline you're on.
So how does current studio support itself?
Well, that's a good question. When we first started, we really, part of the reason we started it was so that we could experiment with different models for how we could support this kind of work. And we knew that some things we would try wouldn't work, and some things maybe would. Hopefully they would. But we, instead of becoming a nonprofit, which is kind of what you would typically expect, we filed as an LLC, but with a very conscious decision that we weren't really motivated by profit, but more about community impact. But we wanted to see if we could make a space for artwork that wasn't necessarily made to be sold, like installation work or things that are more about the expression of an idea or an experience, and then try and create revenue through other program models that didn't depend on art sales. So we have experimented with a lot of different things. We do have studio space that we rent to artists that helps subsidize the work that we do in the gallery. We have an Art of the Month Club, which is a subscription base. You get a new piece of art every month if you sign up as a member. We provide services to artists, so we photograph artwork, we give consultations, we review websites and artist statements and resumes and those kinds of things, grant proposals. And we have other events and programs that do have an admission price or a donation suggested that helps support the work that we're doing. And some of those things have worked better than others. Some of them we thought really would take off, like our Art of the Month Club we thought would be really a fun thing that people would get into. It hasn't really taken off the way that we thought it would. So now we're looking at how can we experiment with changing that up so it's more appealing or more accessible. But we committed to 18 months when we first started, because we called it our pilot period, just to see, like, is anyone interested in this? Is this gonna work at all? Are we gonna be able to continue? Our 18-month mark was in August. We have decided we are gonna continue for another year. So we've got a whole year of programs scheduled for next year, and we're gonna experiment with some more stuff and see what's possible, if we can keep going for another year after that. The transition from, you know, we really hoped at this point we would no longer be asking people to donate to help us keep it going, but we still are, because we're not to the point where we're self-sustaining yet, which is really what we hoped would be the outcome of the experiment, would be a self-sustainable model. We haven't gotten there yet, but we're also not giving up.
And I want to point out here that
Oh.
as an older person here, that the studio that Kelsey's talking about is right near where the Trend Theater was, which was the first place I saw foreign movies, and they had a Burden Festival. And so that makes it pretty interesting.
Yeah.
John, where is it?
It's at 12th and Penn.
Like the old oil ends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
East side of the
Asian
street.
restaurant.
Yeah. The theater's now a record store.
Wayland.
Yeah.
Huh?
Wayland.
Yeah.
Trent, are you still painting?
Yeah.
And are you still working at the museum?
Tell us about your life.
Yeah.
No, but from more of an individual artist,
Right.
as opposed to a
I
collective.
think like that.
You're a youthful young artist trying to get out there, so.
Well, I mean, like, so my, I guess, experience with the art scene in Oklahoma City has, when I graduated college, kind of got involved with OVAC as a volunteer, later as an employee installing their events, the 12x12s and Momentums, and typically empty warehouses. I got on the board at IAO, and I was on that for 6 years, so helped program and stuff there. And when I left OVAC, then I got a job as a preparator, so essentially installing exhibits at the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. So seeing how, at that level of an organization, the curator's picking stuff and then putting it together, and then as much as possible try to say, like, you should show local artists.
But how has that informed you, being behind the scenes in regard to your own practice?
I don't know that it's like informed too much. I mean, there's certainly ideas, since I've been doing kind of pop culture mashups on velvet for about 6 or 7 years. There's been times that there's been a painting on display at the museum that I rip on in a velvet painting. So like that has happened on occasion, but yeah, no, it's just like, I don't know how much, I mean, subconsciously I'm sure it's working, but anymore, just as far as just out and go, like I try to go to as many art shows as I can, so like I've witnessed a lot of growth. Like I remember when Paseo First Friday wasn't a thing, because IAO always had its openings on First Friday, and then Paseo took off, and then IAO had to move their openings off on First Friday, because there was too much competition, everyone was coming down here. And seeing, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, the Plaza District blowing up and all of the activity that's down there. And seeing those artists, you know, like Dylan and Man Bradway when they started their space, and Lindsay Sodro starting like right over there. These people that were in their 20s to 30s starting their own business in like a street that
I think Amanda
was
was right out of high school.
completely run down, and now it's like a thriving neighborhood. Which also coincided with all of the renaissance that Oklahoma City had until our more recent oil bust again. So
I was too early here. I had a place on Paseo
Oh,
for about
yeah,
5 years ago. That was
very cool too.
yeah, too early.
Oh, yeah,
Coffee
I was gonna mention that.
Yeah, we used to fight all the time.
Medina's coffee shop, before the street really took off, was a really interesting hybrid of coffee house, art house, eventually music, and of course,
Alcohol. When that,
we did our political show, the Three John Does, so, right after the bombing. So there was, again, that was a good open-ended format for that kind of activity that was not really happening yet here, I would say.
Before its time, is what you want to say.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I mean, we kind of knew that at the time.
Kind of prehistoric.
No, it's been over 20 years.
I know.
Isn't that amazing?
I know.
I remember going there when I was in college. I
That's
lived
true.
right down here.
I used to go there when I was in
Before
in
Mr.
junior
Park was
high.
I was gonna say the same thing, you weren't that old.
Well, and maybe I should say that the Paseo's been here since 1976. And so it
67.
well, it was called an artist community since 76. So it's had its up and downs, but when you mentioned the plaza, we were coming up. And so Susan Hogan at the plaza called me and said, how do you do this? You know, and she got a Main Street project, which really helped. But so when I came here was like 1990 and 91, and I would call it the dust of Paseo. There was just enough, 50% boarded up buildings and 15 artists, and they were terrific artists. George, Claude Anderson, Ron Roberts, Jill Kemper, Donna Berryhill, B.J. White, unbelievable artists that, and Regina, you came a little bit later, 94, and she shared with Donna Berryhill. So, but there were her before that down at John Robinson's place. Okay. And so what had happened was there were three of us who were new on the street, Sally Lampridge, Colin Rosebrook, and myself in 1990 and 91. And the festival was, when I moved here in 81 and I heard about Paseo, I was like ready to come down here, and I turned around and left without going half a block. The festival was so trashy, I did not want my children here. And so these 15 artists pulled together and said, we want to make it better. No more blowguns, no more crocheted bikinis. And George and Claude used to, jury out of the back of somebody's car, but they required slides and art in the craft and craft in the art. And then when we had a festival, we asked 5 established artists in town. Bill Strube was one, and J. Don Cook, Suzanne Randall, Kayor, if they would come down and help us improve the look of this festival. So there was a collective of 15 artists, and then B.J. White's husband, John, finally got us a nonprofit status, which we didn't have. And
When did that happen?
that happened in the very early 90s. They said we had it, but we didn't. We made some discoveries. And the beauty was there was still a festival for all those years, not of people who were on the street, but people who would come down and have a festival. And I think that helped maintain Paseo. And that would have been the Kathy Reynolds and Jerry Winsell. Loesberg, Mark Gilmore had the erotic art show down here. I mean, I was unfamiliar, but the remnants of you all and your spontaneity and creativity caused us to have, we would sit around and talk like this and say, let's have an event, and we would. And so it helped move us forward.
One thing that hasn't really been discussed about the history is the significance of IAO.
Which started here.
It was the only game in town for a really, really long time.
When CAF burned,
Yeah.
JR basically turned the archives over to the IAO, to Frank Farman. And Frank was doing basically CAF kind of became a public, a funnel for publishing poetry for certain
And was the
poets.
IAO still at John Robinson's building?
IAO was nowhere, it was in Norman, and then I guess it moved.
The first gallery was at John Robinson.
To that building,
Because Frank
and
was there.
Remember that
Martha
short
Mobley
stay?
was the director.
The short stay of IAO when it was in Bricktown?
Reno and Bricktown.
That was after.
That was after.
That was after.
Yeah.
No, when I came back here in 81 and we did the Beaux-Arts Ball, or Bozo Ball, if you remember. The IAO, which I didn't know, there was nothing. It was like this Martha Mobley, and there was like a couple people, and we would have, and you had a show, I remember that great paintings of the swimmers, that was so beautiful. And it was like, well, let's just do something. We've got to do something. I mean, we're going out of business. And we said, well, what do we do? And I said, well, let's have a Mozart ball. And let's raise a bunch of money. And let's rent out the Hall of Mirrors. And let's get every restaurant in town to donate.
Forget the pigs.
The pigs head and every artist in town to donate and everyone to come. And nobody thought it would go. And then everybody said, oh no, it's going to offend our donors. And I said, who are your donors? I said, oh, well, you know, the junior league and all that. And I'm going, fuck the junior league. They'll love it.
They're not gonna be
They
coming
will
down.
love it. They'll love it. And they did. And they did. And we had this thing nobody thought would happen. And when we got down here, and it didn't cost us a thing, and we had, God,
It was a good time.
unbelievable.
It was a good
And there were like 10,000, or, you know, several thousand.
So we like parties too.
Yeah.
We didn't-
And they made enough money to pay the entire year's rent. And that saved the IAO. And then the IAO could move
Continue.
down to that Kingman building after
I
that.
don't-
And
I'm
so
looking at
Paul-
Bill 'cause-
when Paul came down
Just
and opened a
continue.
coffee shop, then it allowed that energy to happen because he was open to that energy.
And
because
he,
he'd
yeah,
been
but
a
that
part
was
of it.
afterwards. That was about
Right.
2 years later, wasn't it, or 3 years later?
I
Yeah.
was
I mean, that was later. But no, I mean, seriously,
What's the calendar?
it was bad. It was a bad scene in 80, 81, 82.
And that's
Was
when,
it at French Market Mall?
Oh,
yeah.
that was afterwards, yeah.
Yeah, that was
Then
in
it
the
went,
early
and
90s.
Joseph,
Yeah.
my hubby, was like president for, or weren't you, for a couple of years? And you kept that thing together. You kept them out of trouble real. That was
Right,
real.
and one of the landmark shows, I have to say, between you and Joe, you did your conceptual show at the IO French Market,
The word shows.
the word shows,
Yeah.
phenomenal, kind of
And,
up your alley, and just to show that, and at the CAF and IAO, those things were happening, performances were happening, interaction, collaborative, that was all happening. You got the new face, and I want you to take that football and run with it, because that's why, what I was trying to do as Arts and Annex,
IAO was always on the verge of losing everything.
and still is.
And it still is.
Still is.
No, I mean, because
I know this.
Because IAO was taking chances on different types of
Right.
shows and stuff like that. For the longest time, the Biting the Apple show, the erotica show that they're very famous for, you know, one year the state funding would, are we going to get it this year? Are we not going to get it this year? Because it was always an extremely precarious situation.
It was
for funding.
edgy. It was edgy.
What has changed in the attitudes? Like, my dad was a painter here who passed away, he was of the old guard.
Absolutely.
And he really, it was heartbreaking for him that the attitudes in Oklahoma were such that, and I'm paraphrasing him, but I want to know if you agree with that, and if you've seen a change, that if it was from Oklahoma, how could it be good?
Oh, absolutely.
Was that something that you
Very
guys
true. Oh, yeah.
felt?
Back when everything kind of dried up here, what you're talking about, 80s, early 90s, I didn't even think about doing shows here, and I moved outwards, right? You know, obviously.
Paul was a full-time
But
artist.
did you find out when you went outwards, you
Yeah.
go, oh my God, if it's done in Oklahoma, it's good.
No, I would sell well either
Oh,
in
not
Scottsdale or
Right,
Santa Fe or
right.
whatever of those to people who lived in Oklahoma
Yeah.
that would not
That's right.
buy my work in
And I'm
Oklahoma.
sure your dad did the same thing.
Same thing.
But why was that?
There was a,
Well, that's-
we've addressed it.
Self-contempt,
Well,
you know.
That's why do you buy caviar, you know, why do you buy champagne?
well,
You know?
yeah, but like, to buy an Oklahoma artist's work outside of Oklahoma.
Well,
like,
you know, people buy
Better
Edward
story.
Shea works.
I know, I'm trying to
Better
nail
story.
down what the sense
I didn't
is.
understand
Well, they
it
like to
either.
say they bought it in
I
Santa
think
Fe.
there was a situation where we didn't, the Okie syndrome was still in place. And I think it has been somewhat alleviated, because I don't think it no longer.
It's still around. a
It's,
little bit.
it's still around a little bit, but it's not to the, when we started out, it was predominant. you guys have not experienced it like we have.
Well, I mean, I
And
expect-
your dad was, you know, a generation before me, and he was definitely fighting, and because your dad was so talented, multifaceted, you know, he would blow me away with his multiple approaches, but I think he did that intentionally to market himself, and he was successful with that.
What would you define as the Okie syndrome?
The Okie syndrome is it can't be good, it's from here.
That's right.
Okay.
There's
The
all
familiarity with, you know,
Right.
it's the contempt for familiarity.
Yeah,
I think
it's
it's about the
that.
story. Where did you find that? Well, I bought it in New York, or I bought
Right,
it in San
exactly.
Francisco.
And that's true.
It lifts their ego up.
I think it has changed.
But see now, a lot of people go, "Oh, there's some great artists, you know, it's like, and you have had a lot to do with that, you really have.
We really have.
I have heard from
You've
people
had more to do
in
with that
Dallas
than you will know.
that if I were any good, I'd be in LA. So I think that syndrome kind of goes
Changed.
to many places. And
Oh,
if
when
that
I was in
LA
San
artist did,
Francisco-
I would be in New York. I've heard that from a lot of people.
When I was in San Francisco, I started this company, Mid-America Corporation, and one of our projects was this thing called Channel One Productions. That's when we thought that cable, you know, VHS cable TV was going to be like the medium. And this is 1970, whatever.
It was there for about an hour.
Well, it was for an hour, but the concept of Channel One was that we were gonna start these little stations in every little podunk town or small city in the country because all art is good. And that was our idea. And it was like, oh, that's so, oh no, but it, you know, because it has to be from San Francisco or New York or LA or someplace like that, or Houston. Yeah, no, it doesn't, or Santa
Well,
Fe.
and I
No.
think that it's not just the changes here. I think that with the internet.
I was gonna say.
and
Well, now with the
everything-
network.
everything is so
We're
global
plugged in.
now. I know very, very successful illustrators that live in Wyoming.
You can live any place you want to and do,
Right.
and we were
And I
thinking
think
that in
people
the
are-
'70s.
Yeah.
So we knew that was possible in the '70s. So, you know, now it just is. It is what it is. I mean, you can be anywhere. You can live wherever you want.
The last
And this is
thing
a very easy place to live.
I just heard an interview with a gallerist in Chicago,
Uh-huh.
and she basically is saying that, well, she doesn't take submissions anymore.
Yeah.
It's all on the internet. She said,
Yeah.
I'm going to spend time every day looking at artists' websites.
Yeah.
That's how
And
she's
so
going to
you
make a
don't-
determination.
Exactly, and you don't have to go anyplace, you don't have to do anything. And if you want to do something, you can do it any place you want to. You do not have to be any place physically.
I think, let's have some people from the audience. I think we've talked enough.
Should we raise our hands?
Sure, if you want to.
Okay. This is kind of interesting that you were talking about, I guess the good art being from Oklahoma or wherever. I was talking last weekend to a friend who's a photographer, and she's been all over the world. And she was saying, she's like, New York's so boring, like LA is so boring, like the people who are really interesting are people like in Norman or just like the middle of America, because they're actually like trying to make things happen. So I don't know. I just thought it was sort of interesting that we were having this conversation with last week.
Well, and that's why I wanted to organize this, and not just for myself, but I wanted to thank everybody that I was a part of the interaction at the opening. Rick Lipper, who's a video guy, and we worked on some projects together. He was saying, "Oh, you've done so good here." I go, "No, you were part of it." You know, all the people that I interacted with. Again, we're not in a vacuum. Artists are not living in a vacuum. We are interacting. We're fighting and laughing and having the drinks together. It's all about the community, and that's why it's so exciting to see other organizations that are popping up and we're having this interaction. That's what I'm all about.
I'm Annie Zell. I'm Sarah Atlee's mom.
Oh, yeah. I know who she is.
You know, Sarah, she's on her way to Wyoming for a residency, but I'm going to speak to her.
Okay.
Because she came here after getting a bachelor's degree in painting at New Mexico and an MFA at Washington Institute of Technology. And she came here where I was living at the time to figure out where she would go next. And we kind of assumed if she wanted to be an art professional, she would go to Chicago or San Francisco or New York or
And she was here for a while and found this community. And it was such a revelation that here were some of you guys who were a community and said, here, the water's fine. And we were wonderful stuff. Why don't you stay here? And she stayed here. And I just wanted to throw that out.
Well, you may not be able to sell your artwork here, but you can sure have a good time next to it.
But that's really changed.
Yeah.
That's changed here. I was gonna bring that up a moment ago, that the overall question that's always hung over all of the artists, probably anywhere, is where's the collector base? It's changed, it's definitely changed, I mean.
Thanks to JRB.
JRB.
I think
No, I
she's done an
agree.
amazing-
No,
she's done a great job.
I agree.
Well,
That.
Joy has a first-class gallery here.
Because
That's why we're
what
here
makes it
having
is
this
if you develop
conversation.
patronage. And
Huh?
patronage is hard to develop
And it's an
without a gallery.
education. We're all in
It's
the
hard.
business of education.
But if people
You're
are
doing
buying
the same
local
thing.
produce.
And their beginning, it used to be, let's see, when did I start here, in 2000?
Who is that?
That's Joy.
Oh, there you are.
And, in 2003, and people would come in and be amazed if I had something they had seen in New York or Santa Fe. You know, they would come in and then they'd look at a name and they'd say, oh, you've got something they have.
Yeah.
And that, they thought that gave me credibility, you know, for a while. And that was, you know, they would come in and they'd say, where else do they show? And, but now it's really changing. It really is changing. And people come in with a very different criteria and very different questions. Our art is still, I think, the hardest thing in the world to sell, because there's no trigger. You know, if I sold coats, it does get cold occasionally. And art is very hard to sell. Another thing about it is that it, and I thought this would be easy. I thought all the other business experience I had that I would figure out how you sold art. And I even told LaFon that early on, and he said, a lot of what? But it's hard to sell because it's so subjective.
Exactly.
And then it's hard to sell to some people because they don't see the line between art and decor. And so you can have a wonderful painting, but they would love for it to have more green. I'd buy that if it had more green in it. The idea that they go buy a new sofa instead is just now beginning to dawn on them. Or that they don't care.
Or they
just
would
have the
buy a
art.
piece of art for $1,000 and put a $4,000 frame on
Yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
it's just crazy. And so you can have, and then another thing in Oklahoma, because we don't have the same kind of collectors that are generational collectors. Like we're not old enough to have the Rockefeller family and all of that, who make independent decisions. In Oklahoma City, if they're spending very much art, it becomes a group decision. Even if you can get them past the spouse, they're gonna bring in 2 decorators and 5 friends. And then you resell it all over again. And that's what Trina's good at, because after about the 3rd presentation, I'm mumbling and going to my And that's true. I kind of know where when I've got reached that, and I try to go somewhere else. But it is. It's so. But it's changing, and people are coming in and seeing it for what it is, and seeing. You know, I told them, I say, art gives you a gift every day. Every time you look at it, and you don't have to change the oil. And you don't have to put new tires on it, and it doesn't need a new motor. And you have it all, they'll say, God, this is $3,000. And I might know them well enough to know that they have a boat. But anyway, it is changing, but it's still, Laura, you know that, it's still difficult. It's still difficult, but it's changing.
If it's any consolation, I'm back up on the city after 27 years in Houston. And I was a director of the temporary over there. And all of this, it's just the same as the city. You know,
It is?
Even in LA and New York.
Yeah.
These same questions.
Exactly.
It is, it's the same thing.
And, I had a conversation with a dear friend in LA once, and he said, we always feel like our job is we're just connecting the needy to the needy. And I was like, I should have been here.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you think
You're
it
so
still
wonderful.
is hard?
Absolutely.
Oh my
Well,
God.
it's just that I'm reading all of this stuff about art fairs and,
It's not about education.
Yeah.
yeah,
No matter
that's
where
what
you
you do.
Where does
That's-
that
That's what
begin?
you do.
Sorry to put you on, hey,
No,
where does that begin?
like, how do we access unique objects? Nobody teaches us this. Like when I was growing up here, like I don't even know what we have on the wall. And I never knew that you could buy art. Until I went to Houston, I was like,
No, it just
there are
started.
stores that you can get art at. And so that's how I became involved.
I think it's the difficult, long-term, educating the entire public that it's okay to do art, it's okay to look at it. Just like art in schools, it's the first thing to get cut.
Right.
It's the super long-term, and it's gonna happen over generations. It's not gonna happen in a couple of years.
I agree with what you said and she said. It is a generational thing, and it has changed. I mean, the idea. I mean, when I started out, even when I actually maybe started doing better work, and I began to sell
When I
in
started
Oklahoma. Yeah.
Good enough to sell in Oklahoma?
That's a high bar.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the idea that I could actually sell a $4,000 piece here in Oklahoma City now, and 10 years ago, would have been almost impossible.
You couldn't give it away 10 years ago.
It was just, it's impossible. And so it happens, and I think that within the next, and that's what's really kind of exciting about you guys being a lot younger, that maybe when you begin, no, I mean, I'm not being facetious or,
He's actually
no, I'm thinking that
patronizing. Is that
within
what it is?
patronizing. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. No, that you will have within the next 10 years, the next 15 years, if we all continue to do our jobs and fight the good fight, and have and bitch at the same time, then that's the education. That's the education that's going to turn somebody that has, some excess money or what have you, to say, yes, I'm going to do, I love this, this is nice.
Hey, it's just
and
a
it's
form
okay.
of entertainment. It really is.
Well, that's,
Isn't it a form of entertainment? I think so. I think art
Well,
can be entertainment.
hey, entertainment is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Exactly, and that's what we're in.
It's entertainment and meaning combined, but
Yes,
also
yes,
a
yes,
drama or something, if you think that's entertainment, has a message too.
No, I mean, a piece of art should be entertainment. I mean, it's something that you look at, you're entertained, you're amused, or you're bemused, or you're horrified. That's all it is.
It's been wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, it has.
Thank you. Okay.